Right. I think we can start, and everyone else will join us later. Right. Hi everyone, and welcome to another session of Outside In. Outside In is a series of events where external speakers come and talk to us about things that relate to our work or the way that we work. Today is also Halloween, and I think there is nothing scarier than to talk about how EdTech companies might be infringing on children's data and putting them at risk. As you might already know, children's privacy is one of the ICO's strategic causes, and as we continue to prioritize interventions where and when we see that children's data are being misused, it's crucial that we understand the increasingly complex world of EdTech. So it is a great pleasure to welcome our guest speaker for today, Saemi Jung, who is a critical EdTech scholar and a researcher at the Digital Democracies Institute of the Simon Fraser University. She is also joining us from Vancouver, Canada, and she will give us a global outlook on the topic. Welcome, Saemi. It's really nice to have you with us. Great. So without further ado, Saemi, the floor is yours. You can share your screen and your presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to the such an important venue, ICO's Outside In. And it's a great pleasure to be here. I'm going to talk about emerging technologies such as AI, facial recognition technologies, chatbots embedded in EdTech products and devices, and how educational technologies are increasingly pervading our children's everyday life since the COVID-19 pandemic. So, by the way, can everybody see my slides well?
Yes, we
Okay,
can.
okay, great, okay. So my agenda today is that we move from sort of descriptions to the normative. So starting with the context about the uses of children's data at school from different countries, their risks, especially children's data privacy and how that is being affected. And I will end with a case study around what is known as the world's first AI textbook in South Korea, and how this will affect children's data in the country and what the learnings from this case study may be. So I want to start off with the Children's Commissioner's Report, Who Knows About Me, published in 2018 in the UK. This report draws attention to the vast amount of data being collected about children growing up today and the ways in which it might shape their lives, not just in the short term, but also in the future as adults. According to this report, over half of the UK's 11 to 12-year-olds with internet access have a profile on a social networking site. And we are familiar with stories of internet-enabled baby cameras, connected toys, Internet of Things, CCTV at homes that often get hacked by others, spying on cameras, or even conversing with people inside home. And many of these technologies bring safety, while there are also risks involved with surveillance and privacy. And if you think about identity theft, all you need is basically your name, date of birth, and address, which are the key pieces of information that most of us are required to put in when creating an account, all of which can be also found on many children's profiles. Before we get into the core uses of emerging technologies in the educational sense, it is very important for us to think about privacy in the following three senses. So when we think about privacy, the first is interpersonal privacy. What do your friends know about you, and what can you see based on the information that you put on your public profile or public platform? The second is institutional privacy, which is what institutions know about your children. So health services, school databases, different kinds of institutions that law enforcement and youth centers, all kinds of institutions collect data and have them available. And thirdly, there's privacy in the commercial sense. And this is something that Sonia Livingstone at LSE, who is also a researcher around children's data rights, Livingstone says that this is very difficult for young people and many children to grapple with because they are sort of born with all these technologies. They're so used to using these technologies. And so they're not used to thinking about you've got privacy in this sense. So when using certain online platforms, consent is always given to start with. It's always opt-in, not opt-out. With the digital technologies fundamentally underpinning our every action online, privacy in this sense is extremely crucial, and a lot of literacy work around this is also underway by many scholars and researchers. But of course, more can be done, and this is why we're here. Now, with that in mind, I want to now move on to talk about the uses of emerging technologies in the educational context, what is now known as EdTech. We can largely divide them into three different areas. So first, we can think about study and behavioral apps, including learning management systems, which are almost always used in schools and institutions around the world now. Then there's the biometric data that children give to the schools. Thirdly, school databases where lots of personal information in named records, including progress reports, exam results, details of any special educational needs, and any absences will be recorded. Now, you might already be familiar with Class Dojo, which is this free mobile app that allows teachers to award and deduct points to children for their classroom behaviors. And it's become a worldwide educational success story, which with their claims that it is being used by over 3 million teachers and 35 million children from 180 countries globally. Despite its popularity, Class Dojo also raised significant concerns from many parents and teachers that may not have considered. There's this one research team in Scotland, Ben Williamson in 2016, showed that the Class Dojo Silicon Valley team received over $20 million to extend into a school-wide platform, quickly making it into an indispensable tool for connecting schools with parents, enabling a constant flow of dojo points, classroom pictures, messages, many videos, and digital portfolios of children's work to be sent from schools to homes. And as you can see, a lot of concerns and risks that a lot of researchers have pointed out with this Class Dojo case. Some of the key concerns that I also want to focus on is purchasing of the data. So Class Dojo was proposing premium features for parents and school districts, and one way it was seeking to monetize its service, it was by selling video content to schools. And parents, for example, could purchase Class Dojo reports to make inferences about their children and their peer groups. School leaders might purchase ready-made reports to single out children for specific classes or special behavior programs. So local government departments could buy the data to compare schools' performance, much as schools are already jogged in terms of test scores. So in this business model, Class Dojo treated teachers as unpaid data entry clerks, contributing to a huge database that could be analyzed from far away to generate insights that parents, school leaders, local authorities might then purchase. Another key emerging technology increasingly used and implemented in schools and classrooms are now facial recognition technology. And in fact, there was this one case in July, this Essex-based secondary school that was reprimanded by the ICO because they did not meet the data protection impact assessment by using facial recognition technology to take cashless payments from students. Of course, from schools, and it will say it is much more efficient, it decreases the queue by much, But any technologies like facial recognition, which deals with our biometric data, comes with many risks. The most important point is that a lot of FRT data are collected in public places like the internet without our consent, without our permission. So Kashmir Hill, who is a tech journalist at the New York Times, who wrote recently this book called Your Face Belongs to Us. And here, your face is our face and belongs to us. Us is the big tech companies. So Hill says tech companies had all agreed that the one thing that no one should do is build an app that you can just take a picture of a stranger and then find out who they are. So Hill argues that even though facial recognition technology could be used for good purposes, such as criminal investigations, the dangers it poses to privacy rights could outweigh its benefits. So both the right to privacy and users' rights to control their personal information shared on social media platforms should be protected. Again, opt-out should be set as a default, not opt-in. So going back to other risks regarding FRT, there can be the lack of permission, as we talked about, and then there's the stalking and disadvantage when applying for jobs. So job applicants who don't want to give potential employers access to details of their personal lives can keep these private, such as by selecting the related privacy settings on social media. However, when facial recognition technology is involved, it could potentially allow recruiters to find out more about you than you'd realize. And then there is predatory marketing, where software that analyzes facial expressions could potentially be put to use by some businesses to prey on vulnerable customers. This could be done by segmenting extreme emotions such as distress and tailoring their products and services to these individuals. So here what we're seeing is this kind of shift, being an educational institution which invites aggressive adoption of an array of surveillance and data surveillance technologies in classrooms in the name of safety and security. So for instance, in early 2000s, the US and Japan were leaders in the adoption of RFID for student tracking. And at this time, Japanese government supported a number of social experiments through national ICT strategies to realize what they called ubiquitous network society. So from government projects that were to realize a ubiquitous network society to parents and teachers monitoring children's behavior pervasively. An RFID child monitoring system was a top-down governmental project in the case of Japan, promoting child monitoring systems in a series of social experiments. So if you go over to the US, this is actually a screenshot of a US RFID production company that provides fixed RFID software and Bluetooth beacon software, which can track asset tags and inventory tags anytime, anywhere. And they have expanded their services to student tracking. So on their website, it says track everything at your school, from passive classroom attendance, real-time student and faculty location tracking with history, configurable email and text alerts for parents, administration, and teachers. And what many critical EdTech scholars or researchers are problematizing with this kind of surveillance trend is that these technologies are basically changing our notion how we should treat children as objects in which we can always track and surveil, especially with RFID chips. So this is a report from ACLU, American Civil Liberty Union. And they have shared that RFID chips in US passport cards were cracked and copied from a distance of 30 feet using $250 in parts bought from eBay. So it comes with a lot of risks in terms of protecting privacy. Now, known as the Identity Information Protection Act of 2005, this bill, SB 682, was in part inspired by a case of an elementary school in Southern California, which required its students to wear identification badges that contained RFID tags, which broadcasted the student's name, photo, grade, school name, class year, and the 4-digit school ID number. And parents successfully petitioned the school to remove the RFID tags. And we continue to see this kind of resistance movement from not only ACLU, but other civil organizations. And I cannot emphasize the importance of the context of how the 2 years of remote pedagogy during the COVID-19 really shaped much of the automatic systems and digital platforms where exploitation of children's data became normalized and set by default now. In Brazil, for instance, educational websites directed at Brazilian students, including 2 websites created by state education secretariats, conducted surveillance on children and harvest their personal data. These are some of the insights coming from Human Rights Watch. And one of the advocates for children's privacy at Human Rights Watch said, children and their families in Brazil are being kept in the dark about the data surveillance conducted on children in online classrooms. And instead of protecting children, state governments have willfully enabled anyone to surveil them and collect their personal information online. In Australia, there has been a survey done which showed high levels of approval for the deployment of facial recognition technology in schools for purposes of monitoring attendance and ensuring student safety. So there are many cases all around the world that around uses of EdTech or surveillance data technologies in the educational context, how those could be used to really secure safety and protection of children. But at the same time, it comes with greater risks that are still very much need to be further investigated. Now, where I am based in Canada, what has been booming as a new market is the online proctoring system and AI textbooks. So more focused in higher education here in Canada, AI tools were launched by textbook publishers like Pearson Education, and they became part of the curriculum at over 100 Canadian universities and colleges this fall. And this year, Pearson fully launched 3 generative AI tools, 1 for instructors and 2 that is embedded into digital textbooks in subjects such as biology, chemistry, business, and economics. And another textbook publisher, US-based McGraw-Hill, announced earlier that it is launching 2 AI tools for students. So there's currently a huge market for EdTech as well. But in 2019, the Supreme Court of Canada also ruled that secondary school students have a reasonable expectation of privacy over their own bodies while at school. And Center for Media, Technology and Democracy in Canada, Luke Stark, said, "We need to ask what models of education, human learning, and the ideal student are generated and perpetuated by using FRTs and other similar biometric technologies in the classroom, both when the classroom itself is entirely virtual and when these technologies are used as part of a hybrid learning system." So then in South Korea, the new AI textbook that will be rolled out beginning March next year, so in about 5 months. If not designed carefully, of course, a lot of these technologies, and including AI textbook, could worsen existing inequalities as technologies often reflect societal divisions. What you're seeing in the screen right now is the promotional policy video launched by the Ministry of Education Korea under the umbrella term of Digital Driven Education Plan, which purports to enable personalized learning and decreases digital divide between the communities of privileged and less privileged students through the use of AI textbook and many other EdTech products. So just if you could be so kind as to play this promotional policy video, that'd be great.
I'll just share my screen, and I hope that it works.
Okay, thank you very much for playing the video for us. Now I think my screen is being shared again, right? So now you sort of get the idea. This is a very state-centrally orchestrated educational policy reform from South Korea that is adopting an array of educational tech devices, and this is sort of under the argument around this is the classroom revolution. AI tools and EdTech will essentially transform education and solve existing educational issues. So this is the kind of larger picture that this digital-driven education reform plan is proposing, and it's also interesting because among all the promotional policy videos that are posted from the Ministry of Education Korea, this policy video is the only one that has English subtitles. And also, it's also interesting to see how a lot of the sort of Harry Potter inspired themes were also embedded. So it's kind of the state government showing or wanting to show that this is a kind of like a big modernization project. You know, obviously AI tools, AI-enabled function devices for grading or admissions can carry biases. A lot of the ethical concerns that we have to think about are first the children's data. We don't know how their data is being protected. There's no safe guideline or measure stating their protection or the use of their data. Even with Korea's AI textbook case, they have shared the prototype, and since the initial rollout will be March next year, they're still not quite sure yet how everything is going to pan out in terms of data protection. A lot has to be revealed, and there are a lot of concerns coming from parents, teachers. And of course, there's a grading and assessment which can carry biases leading to discriminatory outcomes, personalized learning, creativity. There's not enough evidence for the efficacy of these EdTech devices that purport to increase personalized learning or creativity or creative thinking. And a lot of these EdTech devices are now coming with FRT, facial recognition technology. There's the risk of misidentification, of course. And one another big aspect that critical EdTech researchers are talking about right now is environmental concern. Large data centers powering AI consume vast amounts of energy and water, raising sustainability questions amid climate change. And while AI could enhance learning, it also risks contributing to much environmental harm, especially when state project like this, giving one AI textbook to every student, you can sort of see how that will add up. And there's also a pedagogical concern, declining student literacy due to more use of digital devices, addiction to smart devices, possible privacy violations, not enough social interactions with teachers. And then there's also relying too much on data, sort of this data-driven decision-making at administrative level, that there's a lot of risk that comes with it. So after the announcement of the AI textbook initiative in South Korea, teachers have also voiced a lot of concerns, as they have yet to see the actual digital textbooks that are to be put into practice within just 6 months. And according to a recent survey conducted by the Seoul Teachers Union, about 17,090, so about 1,800 teachers who attended the AI textbook training session. And 94% of respondents disagreed on the necessity to introduce AI textbooks. So not just in terms of data concerns, there are also some essential questions that people are asking right now. What kind of education do we want for our children in the era of AI, digital automation? And especially with this South Korean case where they're trying to implement this artificial intelligence powered tablet based digital textbooks by 2025 next year. Concerns over privacy violations, students' over reliance on digital devices continue to stir controversy. And about 55,000 parents also signed a petition to the state to reconsider or even hold off to the rollout of the AI textbook because their concerns over their children not being able, there are already enough problems being caused by using of the EdTech device or tech devices in general, watching YouTube, screen time, not enough social interactions within the family. And what you're seeing right now is this map of what will be the new bio AI complex in a sort of rural area in Chungbuk province in Korea, which will be built around the public research hospital, medical education complex, including AI, what is called AI Bio School. So this map also shows us how a lot of this projects coming from the state centrally orchestrated policy and trickling down to local councils to drive further their modernization project. So using education as a means to drive this very neoliberal state or local modernization. So as we're gearing towards the end of the talk, some of the things that I wanted us to think about collectively is these questions. So what security measures are in place on EdTech products and devices at the moment in your respective country? How much of EdTech should be regulated, and how do we push back then against the exploitation behind the pervasive collection and commodification of children's data? How will data be collected from the EdTech? How will data collected from the EdTech be used? How long will it be kept? Were parents given a choice whether or not to have their child chipped, especially with RFID technologies? Were parents told how educational technology works, what the privacy and security risks are, and what the school has done to make sure that chips are secure and compliant with student privacy laws? And did the local councils consider these questions before they received a federal grant for this program? And broader questions to ask is going back to the meaning of education. So what kind of world do we want to create for our children? So around the case study that I have showed you on AI textbook, this is an ongoing project for me as well. I'm working closely with teachers in South Korea around this state initiative. And for those of you who are interested in learning more about the policy issues around datafied school in Korea, this is the article that you can read, and I think we are ready to move on to the Q&A session. So thank you very much for this this opportunity for me to share what I've been working on.
Thank you so much, Saemi. Right, so please keep in mind that you can put your questions in the chat, and Saemi can answer them. Saemi, one of the things that I wanted to ask is, from the research that you have done, what are the policy gaps that you think need urgent attention?
Sorry, could you repeat that question again?
Yes. What are the policy gaps that you think that need urgent attention? I mean, that might differ from context between countries, but
yes.
In general, what would you say are the general sort of policy gaps that need urgent attention?
Well, specifically in the South Korean case, a lot of the committee members who drive these policies are selected under the very state centrally orchestrated people. So there's already not enough teachers, not enough parents involved. A lot of these EdTech devices, especially because they're being used by children and teachers themselves, their input, their thoughts, and how they want to engage must be reflected in these EdTech devices from the designing process. But none of that, so more could be done on that aspect, and especially this policy being drawn at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, where there was a lot of confusion, uncertainty around education, and then there's a whole rise of existing issues of inequality, sort of digital divide, less privileged, and communities of children being mostly more affected by this circumstance. A lot of this was being addressed by the use of EdTech. So a lot of these policymakers rely on the tech to be the sole solution to a lot of the existing issues. So what I see is that also policymakers tend to, especially in the South Korean case, they tend to work very closely with the private companies. And there's also this catch-up mentality that in terms of artificial intelligence and questions of tech replacing a lot of our jobs, a lot of this uncertainty and fear kind of all go down to pushing for this, okay, we need to train our children to be AI experts or the software engineers, scientists. So there's only one mindset that is being pushed. So I see that as a critical sort of concern and the policy gap that I see.
Right, we have one question. As a parent who's, I'm going to read that out. As a parent whose children use Class Dojo at school, I can tell you that we weren't taught anything about how the technology works or the privacy and security risks. I think this is probably because the teachers don't understand it themselves. What should we as regulators be doing to raise awareness among teachers and parents? Perhaps similar to Ofcom's Making Sense of Media program. And I also, in that question, I would like to ask to add what children need to do in order to to have more agency as users of that technology in schools themselves. What children need to do as well. So the question is what parents need to do and what children need to do.
So I think first of all, sort of resistance, forming refusal movement is also key, because we do have agency to shape the kind of society that we want to live in. That's the gift of being in a liberal sort of democratic society, right? And also in the case of South Korea and many other cases like that I shared earlier in the Californian case, where the children were forced to wear these RFID tagged uniforms or devices, and that there was a refusal from the parents, and that led to bigger law banning RFID tagging of humans, not only in schools but also employment setting. So there can be changes made through the kind of refusal and resistance movements that parents and teachers can form. And with the South Korean case, I do not see the potential of AI textbook being rolled back. I mean, it's a state initiative, so what I see is that it will move on, but there will be a lot of problems coming in as it rolls out. It's inevitable almost. So the one point that I want to focus on, emphasize, is that we have the agency to refuse and resist is also very, very important. And the other thing with the policy guideline is that we gotta make sure that a lot of these tech products that we use, opt out should be set as default, not opt in. When we use a lot of these products, when we try to sign up, we have to opt in. There's no other choice. So that's one thing that at the policy level we can push for.
There seems to be a lot of agreement in the chat in terms of how low the awareness of those kinds of technologies is and how it is used, and also what you said is also reflected in Wei Lin's sort of comment about one narrative being pushed towards sort of there's one narrative that is being pushed, and things the questions that are being thought are more about data loss and security rather than the data privacy aspect of things. So we do have one question. What is the business case for the use of AI textbooks? I might have missed that bit, but I struggle to see the value of it.
Yes, of course. I also saw a chat that said, I won't give permission for my son to have his fingerprint taken for purchasing food in school. This means he can't buy anything as it's a completely biometric system. Yes. So this is a very typical example of not being given an option to say no when we have the privacy right. We have the right to say no. So this is something that needs to be brought up at the policy level, at the government level to really fix this. Regarding the business case for the use of AI textbooks, the EdTech market is actually really, really huge. It's about the size of driverless automobile market. And it is it really has taken up since 2000, but of course COVID-19 pandemic really provided a unique opportunity for a lot of these edtech companies to collaborate with governments and receive government funding to sort of transform, education at digital level. So with this sort of hype around AI, chatbot, and chat GPT and whatnot, sort of edtech hype also grew massively in the past 4 or 5 years. And education became sort of this test bed for a lot of tech companies to test out their different technologies, FRT, RFID, and sort of all the other emerging technologies that I can even follow up with. So the crucial point that we need to think about is that education becoming more and more vulnerable to all these tech companies trying to experiment their own technologies, and also collecting pervasively our data footprints to use for their own profits, because the more data that they have, the more assets that they would have. It's sort of the known ratio for tech companies. So there will be a lot more AI enabled or AI functioned textbooks or devices at tech. We will see a lot more of that in the next few years.
There are a lot of comments and sort of reactions in terms to what is being discussed. One of the comments that I wanted to point out is, for the things that we need to build awareness of, is that at least in the UK, children have the same information rights as adults.
Of course.
It's not just about explaining all this stuff to parents. We need to find ways to explain it to children as well.
Yeah.
So I think, Saemi, you touched upon in your presentation on the subject of the commercialization of children's data. Have you encountered many sort of measures that might prevent companies from monetizing student data?
So that's that's also a huge struggle for many right now, because it's still very emerging. And there is a voice around critical edtech scholars that push for, we got sort of like tobacco companies or drug companies that have to be tested and that have to go through what do you call it, sort of they must be tested before they can be implemented at the commercial level. That sort of procedure must be taken for educational context. So there's this kind of a push and policy level talk that is being done with the EdTech products as well. But yes, I think one of the things we need to build over. Yes, and also with Adrian's comment around about explaining these things to children as well, there's a lot of literacy work being done with children, and especially one of my colleagues is also working on sort of fun way of building pedagogical literacy work around how to understand privacy and surveillance through a lot of artworks. Perhaps that's something that I can share on my own platform, or whoever is interested in learning more about that, I can also share as well. But there are a lot of works that are underway, but of course more can be done.
Right, again, lots of comments. She says that we have recently set up a subgroup to the Children's Privacy Board to look at EdTech specifically. It's still new, but we're going to be discussing our approach to EdTech in the round. There are currently various activities across the ICO, but it's important that all these are brought together. Engagement with the education sector will likely form a big part of our activity, which I think is something very optimistic. Right. Are there any other questions that anyone would like to ask Saemi specifically with what she discussed? I'm seeing a lot of comments rather than questions.
Because I mean, I can feel this. I mean, especially with our children. The school is becoming more vulnerable place for our children, where their essential learning and their social well-being. I mean, the school is the first place they learn how to socialize and how to be a member of the society. And it's becoming more and more vulnerable for our children to be involved in many different kinds of activities within the classrooms. And one of the books that recently came out, or will come out in November 14th, it's called Taming EdTech, Velislava Hillman, and she talks about how EdTech being consistently unregulated, left unregulated, and the implications for children's basic rights and future life chances are constantly being underestimated. So for those of you who are interested in learning more, reading more about sort of children's rights perspective, and in terms of EdTech regulation, what kinds of regulatory or policy suggestions are being made in the UK context. This is a scholar based in the UK, so this is something that you can also check out.
Right, great. I think this is all very useful information, and you can share that link with me, Saemi, and I can share it with the participants after the session as well. Right, if there are no more questions, we can end. Oh, there is one more question. Are we inadvertently conditioning children to accept that their info rights can be routinely overridden? Provide a bit more context.
So by putting children in situations where they or their parents are effectively sort of forced to accept the use of all of these different technologies in a school environment without necessarily the proper checks and balances that we would normally expect to be in place, do you think there is a danger that we're conditioning people from a young age to accept that their information rights are perhaps something that's not important, or something that can be overridden by the authorities almost at will? I think there's maybe a little bit of a danger that we're sort of educating children to believe their information rights are not as important as they should be?
Mm-hmm. I think, I mean, there can be a lot of different ways of understanding and interpreting sort of the rise of surveillance that we face every day, and especially with children who are now sort of born in the era of YouTube, TikTok, and all these digital platforms and devices that are, they're very used to being surrounded by all these tech products and tech companies. So one of the interesting things that Sonia Livingstone at the LSE, who does a lot of work with children in terms of children's data literacy, what she found out is that it's very difficult for young children and young people to sort of grapple with this idea that privacy is actually their right, and that they're because they're just not used to that concept of privacy. So the long-term sort of risk that we see with a lot of these tech being sort of embedded and implemented in an educational setting is that because, I mean, education goes on from very young age to at least for 20 years, right? So they are kind of being tamed within this system as well. So it's very hard for people to develop sort of like kind of critical literacy that sort of Paulo Freire talks about. Paulo Freire, for those of you who are not familiar, who was a Brazilian scholar who pointed out that education was becoming sort of this bank system where children were being we were just admitting knowledge to children instead of we're making a space for children to explore and experiment, experience what it is like to live and learn from that space altogether. So I think it's also important to think about what kind of space that we're creating in terms of education and school settings, and what happens when we implement educational technologies, or largely speaking technologies, emerging technologies that are not completely tested fully, because education again is a very safe bet for a lot of tech companies to, okay, this is good for children, this is good for teachers, and there's no regulation whatsoever on these EdTech safeties. So it's very easy for them to go into this educational market, and that's why EdTech market right now is also booming at an unprecedented speed and scope.
Right. Thank you so much, Saemi, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We'll see you all in our next Outside In session. Have a nice evening.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and for those of you who are more interested in learning more about other things as well, feel free to contact me. And thank you so much for this important venue to be held. Really, thank you. And I hope everybody enjoy the rest of the evening with families and enjoy the festivity.
Thank you, Saemi. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.